Hello and welcome to all of our wonderful guests here today. Jordan Elkin from the marketing team. And let me tell you what an incredible pleasure it is to be joined by three luminaries from TrueAccord's product organization. First, Laura Marino, TrueAccord's Chief Product Officer, Aparna Venkataram, Product Manager at TrueAccord, and Tim Yu, also a Product Manager at TrueAccord. Hello, Laura, Aparna, and Tim. How are you doing?
Great, it's wonderful to be here.
Quick roadmap of where we're going to be heading today. We're going to start with a brief introduction to TrueAccord. Then Laura will provide an overview of why the 2021 tax season is so critical to creditors, along with some of the unique challenges that it will present. We'll then introduce three ways in which cutting-edge creditors are planning to win the tax season, and we'll close with a recap and the opportunity for Q&A. Now, as Lauren mentioned, we always enjoy these webinars because they're so participatory. And to that end, I would love to ask all of the folks here today, ask questions, use the chat feature or the Q&A feature. Both can be found in the icon bar across the bottom of your Zoom window. And for those who are just joining us, as Lauren mentioned, we'll be following up later today with a copy of the deck along with a brief survey about your experience here. And over the next few days, we'll actually provide access to the video recording. So first, just a little bit about us. TrueAccord is a digital-first provider of debt collection solutions. Since 2013, we have been on a mission to reinvent the debt collection space, delivering a superior customer experience while providing industry-leading results. Ultimately, what makes this possible for us is a data-driven, digital-first approach to debt collections. This results in both happier customers and better results. Specifically, TrueAccord uses machine learning to power a personalized debt collection experience, communicating at the right time in the right channel with payment options that meet consumer needs. This results in a highly relevant and personalized experience. It also means a technology platform that is constantly optimizing and improving under the hood from day one for industry-leading results. And we are digital first, which means that we offer the privacy and convenience of a self-serve platform, which ensures a great consumer experience and also ensures infinite scalability. We'll hear much more about all of these concepts over the next 30 minutes. Now I'd like to turn it over to Laura. Laura, thank you so much for joining us today. Can you share some insights with us on the importance and potential challenges of the 2021 tax season?
Thanks, Jordan. It goes without saying that tax season in any year is a critical time for both creditors and consumers. And for context, the average tax refund for the 2019 tax year was close to $3,000. Meaning that refunds represent a major cash infusion for consumers. We hear from many consumers that they view it as a critical opportunity to invest in debt repayment as a way to improve their financial health. Now, to give a sense of how meaningful the opportunity is for creditors, we're looking here at normalized TrueAccord collection data from 2019, our pre-COVID baseline. And you can see that the months leading up to April 15 show a big spike in collection volumes as consumers receive their tax refunds and choose to resolve their debts. But we know that 2021 is going to present unique challenges for several reasons. For one, the macroeconomic landscape continues to be volatile. Uncertainty around the pace of vaccine rollout, employment, economic recovery, and the stock market means that consumer sentiment has not recovered to pre-pandemic levels yet. Simply put, people don't know what the future holds. Second, while the percentage of delinquent loans declined during the past year, that was due in part to forbearance and accommodation policies. Research from ACA forecasts that as things do begin to stabilize over the coming months, the collections industry will see more activity with many creditors seeking repayment of loans. And that means that more creditors and collectors will be focusing on tax season with an eye to repayment, increasing the competitive pressures. And finally, as we have seen in our research, the past year has accelerated a change in consumer behaviors and preferences. The shift to digitally connected workforce and home life, with services from e-commerce shopping to food delivery to groceries and entertainment, all available with just a click of the button, has meant huge changes in our expectations as consumers. Just for one data point, the Wall Street Journal reported that the average US adult now spends roughly 16 hours a day with digital media, up from 12 hours a day from the pre-pandemic days. So all in all, we're seeing three shifts that are changing the game for tax season 2021. Lingering consumer uncertainty, an increase in the competitive pressure among creditors to transform tax refunds into resolved debt, and a historically unprecedented shift in consumer behavior. So how should creditors think about navigating this minefield? Where there's a dated conventional wisdom in the collection industry. Consumers will spend their tax refund dollars on whatever creditor or collections agency happens to reach them first. So hit the phones hard. In fact, our research shows that this couldn't be further from the truth. As you can see from snapshots of some of our consumer interviews here, consumers go through a rather sophisticated decision process about where to invest their tax refund dollars. Of course, there are considerations of which debts to repay based on the size, impact on credit score, and other tactical factors. But critically, consumers choose to repay debts when the process is easy and convenient, when the plan is tailored to their needs, and when they trust the creditor. And we think that this is a critical insight, that the collections industry can actually do better when we deliver a superior consumer experience. And that's the crux of our innovation strategy for tax season 2021. So let's talk a little bit about what we've been working on. When we think about the consumer journey, really at any time, but especially around tax season, we think of there being three critical moments of truth where we have to cut through the noise and win consumers' trust and engagement. First is the moment of outreach, connecting with the consumer. The key here is personalization, showing that we understand and care enough about the consumer to tailor our communications to her preferences. Second is the process of resolution, how we help consumers commit to and stick to a plan. The key here is flexibility, providing meaningful options to make their life easier. And the third is how we respond when questions or concerns arise. The key here is responsiveness, the human touch at scale. We're going to go through these one by one and introduce the way we think about winning tax season 2021. To begin, I'd like to introduce a partner from the product team to talk a bit about personalization. Aparna, can you help us understand some of the innovations that your team has been working on?
Absolutely. Thank you, Laura. I'm so happy to be here. As Laura described, the challenge that we're trying to solve around personalized outreach is how to cut through the noise and reach consumers in a way that's relevant to them. Consumers are bombarded with many messages via many channels that are competing for their attention, so it's definitely a very difficult problem. Fortunately, we're aided by Heartbeat, our patented machine learning engine that enables us to do personalization at such a massive scale. So let me describe how Heartbeat really works. It is not an exaggeration when I say that it represents a complete rethinking of what personalization is in the collection industry. Of course, there are many collection agencies out there that still invest in legacy call and collect approaches, and there might be a few more progressive ones that have invested in some personalization capabilities, like you see what we've illustrated over here on the left. Each of those colored dots, if you can imagine, is a treatment. This is a specific message via a specific channel. Different consumer groups are assigned to different sequences. For example, high balance, new vintage consumers get journey A, low balance, older vintage consumers get journey B, etc. This is a step in the right direction, but it has a few limitations. The first, it still buckets consumers into broad segments, and it ignores the differences in preferences and behavior between the consumers. Second, it's static and predefined, and it doesn't adjust as more data is observed about each consumer. Heartbeat works differently. The system continuously monitors behavior and engagement data for each individual consumer and dynamically optimizes the journey based on what is going to work, what is likely to work best. For example, a consumer may open and click on an email, and based on behavior patterns that we've seen in the past for similar consumers, Heartbeat might decide what the next best message to deliver to that consumer is. The end result is a system that delivers personalized journeys at a massive scale and that continuously self-optimizes over time. So one simple framework that we use for thinking about personalization is right message, right channel, right time. So let's start with the right message. The right content obviously is a prerequisite to be able to drive consumer engagement and action. Having run tax season campaigns for many years at TrueAccord, we have a deep body of knowledge and best practices about what has worked in the past across different industries and sectors, similar to many folks that are on the webinar today. So for instance, many creditors may have seen success with tax season specific messaging like the one that we've displayed over here, driving commitment by highlighting tax refunds and using social proof. That is, many people have done it. Here's the thing, because consumer behavior is ever changing, there's unfortunately no silver bullet here, no single message that always works. As a result, the single most important capability is an experimental design framework that enables us to rapidly experiment and iterate on multiple different messages. So we've found that during tax season, for example, different content strategies are performing strongly for different consumers. The next would be the right channel. The challenge isn't just delivering messages across multiple channels. What is much harder to do is a way to intelligently balance the multiple considerations to find the right channel for the individual consumer. We have to think about what channels are permitted under federal and state regulations, so the compliance piece of things. What consent has the user given us, or what channels do they want to be contacted in? So the user permissions and preferences. And what is the optimal next touch point to drive engagement and commitment? This is what machine learning gives us. So during tax season, when there are more competing demands for the consumer's attention, we're doubling down on refining these capabilities for Heartbeat. And the results speak for themselves. Just to give you one data point about the upside when you nail the right channel, we see that our own data, picking the right channel, example, SMS and email, drives up to 75% lift in resolution rate compared to just using a single channel strategy. Next would be the right time. Beyond personalizing the right message and the right channel, Heartbeat is continually mining consumer behavior to identify the right frequency and time for outreach. This makes sense as a consumer. Think about how much more likely you are to pay attention to an email when it arrives as you're unwinding for the evening, as opposed to when you're just logging into work. Or maybe the opposite might work for you. The point is that it is totally up to the individual, and we have built Heartbeat to understand and leverage those individual level differences. Again, the results during a crowded tax season make a huge difference. Identifying the right moment to reach out to the consumer drives a significant 15% improvement in click rate. So to summarize, personalizing consumer outreach during tax season requires an experimental framework to hone in on the right message during tax season, intelligent decisioning around the right channel, and then a focus on when you want to actually be able to capture the consumer's attention and get their engagement.
Thanks so much, Aparna. Now, Tim, you and your team have been hard at work optimizing the resolution process. Can you tell us a bit what you've learned?
Sure thing. Thanks, Laura. So let's start with our core thesis. So as Laura highlighted earlier, our research shows that consumers choose to invest their tax refund dollars when they're presented with plans that are more flexible and tailored to their needs. And so with that finding in mind, we focus on offering flexibility and customization through the entire resolution process. So from the process of committing to a plan through ensuring follow-up and ultimately resolution of that debt. So let's start with commitment. So we've seen time and time again in our research just how important flexibility is, which is the ability for consumers to tailor a plan that actually fits their needs. And so, for example, we shared in a previous webinar the tremendous lift that we saw in commitment rates when we offered the ability for consumers to align their plan payments with their paydays. Such a flow that offers guidance and gives consumers that ability to create their own plan is a prerequisite to securing commitments during the tax season. And with that said, because we're all about providing flexibility, we also offer quick ways to set up payment plans for those that don't have paydays, or maybe they already know what they want. Now, it's obviously critical to get consumer commitments during the tax season, but once a consumer commits to a plan, how do we help them actually succeed and get to that finish line? So one of the most successful investments we've made to date is in our ability to predict the risk of a consumer breaking their payment plans. So for a bit of context here, we've dug into the roots of why customers break their payment plans. And we found that it's largely because they don't have enough funds in their bank account when a recurring payment is withdrawn, which can result in their payment plan breaking, and also insufficient fund fees being charged by their bank. And that can actually leave them in a worse financial situation than they started with. At Truecore, we have so much historical data around our customers' debts, their payment plans, their behaviors around engaging with our emails, their contact behavior with our call center, their payment behavior, and so much more. And so what if we could use all of that data to predict the likelihood of a customer failing on a future payment in an existing payment plan at any given time? We can actually generate dynamic risk scores and identify whether a customer is at low or high risk of breaking their plan. And in addition, we can proactively offer these different tailored actions that customers can take to reduce their chances of breaking a plan. And the results of these interventions have just been game-changing. As you can see, they've reduced failed payments by 7% and reduced the rate of broken plans by 17%. But the risk model has also spawned a whole new set of very promising tactics for tax season, which is the inverse. Specifically, reaching out to consumers with a low predicted risk of breakage of their payment plan to highlight the benefits of actually accelerating their repayment schedule. Why not pay off your debt faster if you can reasonably afford to do so? The early results we've seen have been incredibly encouraging so far. We're seeing faster liquidation and consumers that are just happier to be debt-free earlier. And so to sum this up, we're able to maximize follow-through once a commitment to resolve a debt is made by supporting the ongoing success of a payment plan in a way that's tailored to the needs of each individual. And finally, during a time when consumers have so many choices of where to spend their tax refund dollars, how can creditors drive immediate or faster resolution? So a classic tax season tactic in our industry that we all know of is the use of discounts, or more known as settlements, to spur action. For example, a 30% discount on a balance in exchange for resolution today. Now, this is helpful in the sense that it gives each consumer the ability to get out of their debt quicker while helping them prioritize the creditor that may be offering a discount. But the challenge here is that this often can result in lower liquidation rates. And so that's why we've been rolling out an exciting set of capabilities and offering more targeted settlement offers. We're able to set a dynamic offer strategy for different types of placements. And we've chosen to invest here because we see this as the perfect example of meeting the needs of both the consumer and the creditor. And the results have been phenomenal. So in addition to a 37% lift in the resolution rate, we've actually seen liquidation up 14% as a result of a targeted offer strategy that we tested. And so in summary, the second pillar of winning the tax season is all about helping consumers easily through flexible self-serve options, through customized tools that keep them on a payment plan, and also providing the right offers that are tailored to their individual needs.
Thanks so much, Tim. I'd actually like to talk about the final pillar of tax season success myself. It's a topic that I care about deeply. In fact, part of the reason that I joined TrueAccord is because the company's mission of delivering human empathy in collections at an unprecedented scale. We have a scalable solution because we have a system that drives personalized outbound communication and a platform that allows customers to self-serve. So 96% of accounts are resolved without the need for any agent intervention. But some consumers ultimately want or need a human connection to help them solve their problem on their own time. And how do we deliver that effectively? We've long had a hypothesis that we can harness the power of machine learning and AI to promote more human care and communications around collections in a timely manner. And I will tell you why we think so. To assist our inbound call center team in promptly responding to consumers, we sometimes use automated agents to send communications. All messages are reviewed by the TrueAccord team, but our machine learning platform, Heartbeat, personalizes and sends these messages to help consumers in the resolution process when they need it. And to provide meaning, our automated messages use virtual sender names. And we publish the list of our virtual staff so that consumers are aware and can verify the authenticity of the message. But what's exciting is that the interactions driven by our virtual agents are so effective and feel so natural that we get messages like this from satisfied consumers who got the help they needed when they needed from our virtual agents. And this is a pretty astonishing thing to think about. There are a lot of examples of robotic automation. Think about autoresponders and interactive voice response systems. But AI has the potential to solve problems and also provide a more natural, more human experience. So we see two major areas of opportunity for tax season 2021 and beyond. First, we have been investing in building out a set of natural language processing capabilities to parse consumer communication and understand intent. For example, does a consumer have a question about debt? Do they need more information? Are they claiming hardship? Second, we've been working on the automated delivery of customized content based on the consumer's need at any point in their specific journey. The results so far have been very, very promising. We currently have over 95% accuracy of our virtual agents in understanding critical types of consumer needs. And this has enabled our virtual agents like Teresa to deliver the care in the moments that matter deeply to our consumers. So to summarize, new applications of AI are enabling creditors to provide the next frontier of human empathy at incredible scale, something that matters to our consumers and drives engagement and results.
Thank you so much, Laura. Well, to summarize, as Laura described, the 2021 tax season presents historic challenges driven by lingering consumer uncertainty, an uptick in creditor activity, and changes in consumer behavior. In order to deliver a superior consumer experience and drive results, creditors must connect with consumers during three critical moments of the journey. We call the three critical moments of truth: outreach, resolution, and care. And machine learning is actually key to delivering the personalization and flexibility that creditors need in order to cut through the noise at those moments. Now, I am in the fun position of getting to see the many questions that are coming in through our Q&A. I'm going to go through some of these in order. The first one is actually for Aparna. And the person asking the question says, thank you for sharing the time of day when you are most likely to engage with emails yourself. I think you said it was after dinner. No, but in all seriousness, the question here was, Aparna, you referred to an experimental design framework as being really critical in continuously testing what types of communication resonate with what consumers. What exactly is meant by an experimental design framework, and how does that work at TrueAccord?
So an experimental design framework is just basically our ability to be able to think about what we want to test and be able to input all of our details and get results that we can actually read and iterate upon. So for instance, if we are testing out messages, we want to be able to test out different messages, sending to different types of consumers to figure out what is working and what's not working. And the way we design the experiment that is what we mean by framework. Like, when do you want to send the message? How many times do you want to send the message to that person? And then how do they respond? Are we able to read the results accurately? And what is the lift we're getting? Are we getting any lift at all? And if we're not getting any lift, perhaps we need to kind of switch the experiment up a little bit and add new content or remove some old content that's not performing and sort of quickly iterate on that. And that is what I mean by framework. And this kind of works not just in the content sense, it also works in the channel sense. It also works in the timing sense, where we talked about the right message, the right time, and the right channel. We can use a similar framework across all of these to test all of these different concepts.
Aparna, you are very popular from our Q&A because the next question is actually for you as well. Natural continuation of the insights that you just offered into an experimental design framework. The person asking this question notes that one of the challenges you highlighted in leveraging a system like Heartbeat to identify the right channel for a consumer is that there are actually multiple considerations at play, including the regulatory compliance framework, stated preferences of the consumer, and then the machine learning itself. This person wonders if you can elaborate a bit more on those three challenges and why it's so difficult to strike the balance between them.
So the traditional approach to a multi-channel strategy would be more waterfall-like, where they say, okay, so we have an email channel, let's just send a bunch of emails. We have a call channel, let's make a bunch of calls. And okay, now we have both channels, let's kind of just alternate between the two and see what that happens. Or maybe a little bit more sophisticated, where we talked about that sequencing approach that we showed in one of our slides earlier. So that is typically the approach that people tend to take, a waterfall or sort of a layering approach when it comes to channels. But the way we are approaching the problem is a lot more nuanced, because we are taking into consideration all those other three aspects that you just mentioned in your question, which is the compliance piece, which channels are we allowed to communicate to the consumer in. The second is what are the preferences the consumer themselves have. They may state that they want to be taught, like they want us to call them in the morning at 9 a.m. on the phone, or only send text messages after that because they're at work or something like that. So they have all these preferences and indications, and so we want to be able to incorporate that into our decisioning as well. And in addition to that, in addition to what permissions consumers have given, we want to be able to intelligently decide that, okay, they've given us a permission between phone and calling them on the phone, or sending an email, or sending an SMS. We want to decide what is the most optimal approach to get the engagement that we want. So that's where machine learning would come in. We take in all of the historic data that we have about similar consumers and figure out, okay, so this consumer with all of these different preferences typically tends to respond to channel A over channel B at this time. So let's go with this channel. And that's kind of how we would approach this problem.
Understood. Thank you. Mr. Yu, a question for you. You mentioned a risk-based model, and you talked about two applications, one around payment plan breakage prevention and one around acceleration of the payment plan for consumers at low risk. The question here is, how does the risk model work? Can you talk us through why it's built the way that it is, and a little more context there, please?
Sure thing. So traditionally, like the idea of personalization isn't new in general. It's just the way that you apply it is different. The way that we do it is different. So traditionally, there's traditional scoring where, a lot of debt collectors or companies will, they will segment their customers. They'll, sort of predefine, what these attributes of their best customers might be, and leverage that, which can certainly have impact. But for us, by taking a model-based approach, we're able to do that on a much larger scale with a much broader set of data, and also be able to adjust that scoring, that risk scoring in a dynamic way as data changes. So I mentioned earlier just the amount of data that we have, everything from not only the information around the type of debt balances that they have and the creditors, et cetera, but also around their behavior and how they engage with TrueAccord, whether it's through emails, whether it's through the call center, whether they're only opening emails or they're also engaging with emails a certain amount of frequency. and even like their payment behavior, right? What payment channels are they, what payment methods are they using? ACH versus card. I mean, there's so many data points, and it would be very, very difficult to try to predefine such a large number of attributes and try to make some assumptions around what sort of performance that might indicate. And so by taking a risk, by building this risk model, we're able to dynamically determine these risk scores, whether someone's high risk or low risk. And what's interesting is that as their behavior changes, so for example, maybe they started out as a high risk customer, but then their situation changed and they started being able to make payments fine, they could turn into a low risk customer. So being able to account for these changes in real time in a dynamic way is a huge advantage for a model like this. And the more data that comes in, the more powerful it becomes. And it's just able to adjust, with uncertainty as well. I mean, in today's world, people's financial situations are probably pretty volatile, and it's hard to predict what's going to happen. And as long as we keep being able to feed our models a lot of data on an ongoing basis, it's something that we're always going to be able to adapt to and improve the model over time.
So follow-up question there. On the slide where you showed some of the results of the risk model, our question asker here notes that it seems like the payment plan breakage, there's some historical data showing the efficacy of this. You teased some early results for the inverse related to tax season, which is low-risk consumers' acceleration of a payment plan. How are you and the team thinking about measuring the effectiveness of interventions that are tax season specific around payment plan acceleration? So what are the KPIs that the team is focused on, and what, if any, early data do you have to share on results?
Sure. So, as we mentioned, we talk about, for the tax season, talking about giving consumers the ability to pay off their debts sooner, right? As they choose to reinvest their tax refunds of TrueAccord. And what that means is making payments, either you can choose to make larger payments, or you can choose to just make your payments sooner, right? And the specific treatment that we've been testing is really around how can they actually reduce the length of their payment plan, meaning how can they actually increase the amount of money they're paying for each installment. And there's a lot of other strategies, such as settlements. Maybe they can afford to pay off their discounted balance right now and get that liquidation sooner, get that debt off their books sooner. There's just a lot of ways. And the key thing that we look at really comes down to, when we think about measuring results, you sort of think about a funnel, right? The end result is going to be liquidation, right? What amount of money they've actually paid out of the amount of money that they owed. But even before that, there are going to be a lot of different indicators that can actually almost sort of predict what the liquidation, like what sort of impact it'll have on liquidation. For example, if a consumer, we see that on our website, on our platform, that they reduced their, let's say they had a 12-month payment plan, they reduced it down to 6 months. Then we know that their average installment size has increased as a result of that. And as they make their payments, we know that that will be a leading indicator of faster liquidation. So we don't necessarily need to wait, through the entire 12-month period, whatever period it is, to know, what sort of success this might lead to. We can start to already get a pretty good sense of what sort of impact it will have from a directional standpoint pretty early on. And so from an experimentation standpoint, that gives us the ability to actually move a lot faster, because we can leverage these behaviors earlier in the funnel to sort of predict how it's going to perform over time.
Understood. That's great. Thank you, Tim. Interesting question from a representative from a subprime lender here who's facing a decision fork that I would imagine is not unique to this individual. Trying to identify an economic way to scale payment options across channels. So is it worth investing in additional call center representatives, or should this organization instead double down on digital tactics? And they're wondering if there's any data or insights that we can share around what we're seeing in terms of consumer preferences for resolving over different channels. This is really a question for any of our panelists, but what do we see in terms of how TrueAccord consumers actually choose to resolve their debts?
Well, I'll start, and Tim probably has additional things to say. When it comes to payments, again, the point is providing flexibility to offer what best suits the consumers. We see a lot of engagement with digital channels. As I had mentioned before, 96% of the accounts that close end up doing it through purely digital channels and self-service. And we see a lot of success with providing payment plans that really allow the consumer to select what best works for them. So in terms of choosing between SMS and IVR, I would say we see interest in digital channels, but I also say it is a lot about providing the flexibility. And digital channels that also provide the flexibility of really setting up the conditions, the payment plan, is probably what is going to be most helpful to consumers.
A question from a debt buyer here on the phone. This is also open-ended, so I'll address it to all of our wonderful product leaders here. What's been surprising to you? I would imagine each of you has been through this cycle of tax season, working on the product side, viewing consumer behavior. Are there any results that have really surprised you, things that we're learning that are unexpected or have changed the way that we're thinking about product roadmap, current and future product capabilities?
Laura, if you want to go ahead.
I was just going to say about what, I mean, we run a lot of experiments. Aparna, Tim, the other teams are doing a lot of experiments. One that to me was probably not surprising, but really confirming a lot of my theories was the fact that we discovered that by sending a second reminder prior to us getting the payment for payment plans that have been set, what we had seen was that sometimes people would not have funds when we were trying to get the payment, and those payments would break. And we ran some experiments to see whether it would help to send a second reminder just a few days before the payment was due. And we saw an incredible uplift. And that to me is, again, a confirmation that people who are in debt want to pay. They want to get out of debt. And all they need is a little bit of the help. By us being able to remind them ahead of time saying, hey, you have a payment due in the next 2 to 3 days, we really allowed those people, gave them an extra tool to first make sure that they had the funds in their account so that the payment wouldn't fail, or if they didn't, go and actually adjust their payment plan to get some lower payments. So it is very reassuring to see how consumers in debt really, really want to get out of debt, and all they need is the help, the flexibility, the little nudging for them to really be successful.
That's wonderful. Aparna, any surprises for you so far this tax season?
I wouldn't say surprise, but more like reassurance. We already discussed that point actually in the talk today, where we've discovered in our consumer interviews that it's not that we should be the first one in line once the consumer gets the refund, to get our debts paid off. It is more, the consumers go through a more sophisticated decisioning process to figure out which ones they want to pay off first. And we want to be the ones that are the most flexible and approachable for them. And that I think would be the most valuable lesson that I've learned in all of our research with respect to tax season and beyond.
And one final question, full disclosure, this is a question from me. For each of you, you highlighted 3 broad areas of innovation that I would imagine are particularly important during tax season, but TrueAccord will always continue to invest in deeper personalization and more flexibility around resolution. I would love to hear in a few words from each of you, what are some of the next frontier in the area that you spoke about? So the experiments that you're gearing up to run that are most exciting, and perhaps in the next webinar we'll be talking about. So I'll start with you, Aparna. Tell us a little bit about what gets you excited when you think about the personalization roadmap.
Personalization roadmap for me, I think, is just kind of doubling down on some of the concepts that we already talked about, which is, adding more and more intelligence into the right message, right channel, right time. The intelligence just gets better as we get more and more data. And I think that is what I'm most excited about, because we are continuously iterating and continuously innovating on how we approach this problem altogether. And I think that is what is most exciting for me, to add more intelligence into that engine that we call Heartbeat.
Mr. Tim?
Yeah, there are a lot of things that excite me, but one thing that I'm particularly bullish on is this concept of a modular and dynamic user interface, specifically for the web. So, Aparna has talked a lot about, from a communication standpoint, reaching people at the right place at the right time with the right content. And, I think there's a lot of opportunity in the web experience that I think is untapped by many in the industry, and we certainly have a lot of exciting room to grow in. For example, when you go on a website, oftentimes it's fairly static, right? If you order different things on a page, they're typically going to be in the same location. Maybe you'll show something sometimes, maybe you won't show something, maybe sometimes you won't show something else. Information might change, but if you think about the amount of data that is present in that user experience, when a consumer clicks on something, when they go to a certain page, they drop off from somewhere, maybe they start typing in amount that they want to pay. Maybe they clicked on a specific offer. That is all incredibly valuable information. And for TrueAccord, with our AI capabilities, being able to leverage information like that to further personalize the experience into one that is completely tailored to the consumer beyond just even, their debt information and, other behaviors that we already track, which is a lot. There's that next level that can still be unlocked. And so I'm personally super, super excited for us to continue to build out towards that vision.
Thank you, Tim. And Laura, finally, the next frontier of human empathy at scale.
Well, I'd say that I'm excited about the overall effort that we have, because at the end of the day, it's an effort to see how can we best serve consumers, because we have confirmed that as we do best for consumers, we actually deliver best results to our creditors as well. And this combination of having access to so much data, focusing on personalization, combined with a lot of effort we're doing to truly understand our consumers. And we have a big effort on user research, understanding what matters to them, bringing all that together to improve the communication, to improve the experience that the user has, to improve the offers that users want to see. I think that that's the combination that is really that next frontier, understanding consumers and then using the data we have to really address what they really want to see.
Laura, Aparna, Tim, I'm not exaggerating when I say that it is always the highlight of my day to get a chance to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time and for so graciously sharing your insights and research with us here. So on behalf of the product team here and all of TrueAccord, thank you once again for attending, and we hope that you have a wonderful day.